feet with pretty good coverage, but it wasn't enough coverage to get out and really do anything other than hike around and play in it and make snowmen. It wasn't good skiable snow yet. There wasn't a lot of coverage. And then the picture on the right is from 2 years ago, coming out of Avalanche Canyon. And those of you familiar with the San Gabriel's and the Angeles Crest Highway know that this canyon sits just west of Mount Waterman. And so we had been out in that area, and as we were heading back down the 2, because the road was closed where it is right now at the 6,000 foot gate, we saw a couple drainages like this that had just slid during the day while we were out there. So I just threw that up to give you guys a little something to look at. But as far as our mountains, this past November and December were the 3rd driest in recorded history for Southern California. Prior to that, we had a very dry fall combined with warm weather and high winds, and we had some really large fires in both of our mountain ranges down here. Due to those fires, we have a large area that's closed in the Angeles National Forest and a large area that's closed in the San Bernardino National Forest. So if you go to the Avalanche Center, which is at socalsnow.org, on the landing page, we have a link right at the very top to those closures from the National Forest Department and maps that give you the layout for that. But basically right now the San Gorgonio Wilderness is closed and the Angeles Crest Highway is closed at the 6,000 foot gate, and rumor has it will probably be closed through the winter at that point. And then most of the terrain, not all of it, but most of it south of the highway, which is all of our really good north-facing slopes off of the 2, are part of the forestry closure. So go to the website and you can check that out. We do have a little bit of disturbances lined up over the weekend and into next week, so we may see some light snow. We got a little bit of light snow yesterday, but nothing of significance. And as stuff starts to build up, we will give you more information on that. So definitely keep following us and use the Avalanche Center. So we're going to get into our show for tonight, which is Backcountry Touring Basics. And I just want to start out and say that this is not just for skiers, even though that's what's pictured here. This is also going to be information for split boarders, but it's going to be useful information for anybody that travels in the winter mountains, whether it be snowshoes, hiking, mountain climbing. You're out there in crampons, you're going to be able to take something home from this. And regardless of whether you're a novice or a very experienced backcountry user, there'll definitely be at least some refresher information or maybe some new stuff that you can gather from tonight's presentation. So we're going to move forward through this. And one of the first things I want to talk about is things that even before you get going into the backcountry, things you want to consider. One of the really important things is your mode of travel. So if you're a downhill skier or snowboarder, if you're new to the sport, the backcountry is not the place to learn it. If you guys want to talk to Josh about that at the end of this, he can tell you a little bit about that. But it's really, you don't have groom runs, you don't have lift service. And the problem you have in the backcountry, and I've learned this over the years, is that you spend a lot of time going uphill for a little bit of downhill. And I personally really enjoy the uphill. I enjoy the escape and being out there. But what I found over the years, it's been probably close to 2 decades that I've been doing this. I used to compete in the USASA Nationals on a snowboard. So I got pretty comfortable at my riding. But over the years of doing backcountry, I was sort of shunning resorts and doing nothing but backcountry. And I found that my riding really started to decline. I got really good at going uphill, but my downhill slowly deteriorated. So I've spent the last couple of years starting to work in resorts and go inbounds. So basically what I'm trying to point out is that if you're new to this, you want to go and learn your downhill in inbounds at a resort, use the local resorts for that, use the lift access terrain where you can get a lot of laps in. And if you're proficient, you want to be at least at a good intermediate level and very comfortable on varying snow conditions, because you're going to see a lot of different types of snow, even as you travel on one run downhill in the backcountry. There's no groomers out there, so it's a different animal. Equipment-wise, we can all get caught up on equipment. I'm a gearhead. I love gear. And this is kind of a bloated photo of gear. I was actually packed up for a long trip, road trip with a couple of multi-day backcountry tours in it. Generally, you're not going to pack 3 ice axes in your kit as pictured here. But you want to have well-tuned equipment. So your skis, your snowboard, split board. You want to make sure you have snowshoes or skins, depending on what your mode of uphill travel is. And again, like I said, this is all information that snowshoers and other people can use as well. So you're going to want to have a map and a compass and a GPS. These days, not many people use an actual dedicated GPS. You've got really great apps for that, and we'll talk about that a little later in the presentation. Inclinometer is a really important tool, and most compasses you can buy have that in it, and that's for measuring slope angles. And then you've got your Avalanche safety gear. This is 3 pieces of equipment that are super important: a beacon, a shovel, and a probe, and to know how to use those. So for that, you're going to want to take an Avalanche course. And at this point, I want to mention that mentorship is actually a really key part of the backcountry. So with the situation the way it is right now, through the spring and the summer, we had records numbers of people going out into the outdoors. And this winter, we're expecting the same thing. If we talk to the manufacturers, the sales show that there is a record number of gear sales, especially for backcountry gear. And there's only so many classes for Avalanche classes and backcountry touring in that, and most of those have been selling out. So you're going to want to get, we're going to want to mentor people. Our locations in the mountains, especially in our area, when it starts to open up with snow with these forest closures, we're going to get really congested because we're going to have limited access to these spots. And the only way it's going to be enjoyable for both experienced and novice people is if we really help each other out. So if you're experienced, seek out beginners and novices and help them out. Give them a guiding hand, make them good backcountry trail partners, show them trail etiquette, and teach them the ropes. They're going to have a better time, and then we're all going to have a better time. And if you're a novice or new to this, check into groups, reach out to people on our Instagram feed, and there's other groups out there. There's several groups on Facebook and Instagram that have to do with going into the mountains, going into backcountry skiing and that, and find partners, find people that have the experience. It's the best way to learn. And then I'll touch on this again towards the end of the night, but hire a guide and go to a guiding service. We've got here in LA, we have Further Your Adventures. In Bishop, we have several guiding companies. And in San Diego, we have Wilderness Leadership Institute. All of those people can definitely help you out and get you going in the right direction. And then aside from your Avalanche safety gear, you should have a first aid kit. And it's good to have medical training to go with that, at least wilderness first aid. And then communications. And what we want to talk about here is not just communications with the outside world, but intergroup communications. I highly encourage everybody to use radios. Pictured in here, I've got a couple of BCA radios. They're super handy. Just those little FCS radios, the little radios you can buy at Radio Shack give you at least a little bit of distance. Because once you're out in the mountains and you get out into the terrain, you can have whiteout come in and you don't have a way to see each other very well if you start getting spread out. Winds kick up and communication can be really tough. And you get any kind of distance and it's hard to communicate. So having a way to communicate with each other and keep apprised of the conditions is super important. And then for outside communication, you definitely want to have some form of outside communication. In our Angeles National Forest mountains, there's very few places that have cell phone service. So cell phones can be handy in some places, but most places not. So you want to have a spot is great. The new InReach devices are really good. They're super small. Radios and even a sat phone. It's a little bit pricey, but that could be an option. But definitely have a way to communicate with the outside world should things go bad. And then your personal gear, more geared towards like what you're carrying for yourself as far as clothing. You want clothing suitable for your planned outing. So whatever the day is going to be or your multi-day trip is going to entail, what the weather conditions are is really going to dictate your general clothing that you're going to bring. And then always bring extra clothing. me and a couple of my partners have, for pretty much as long as we've been going in the backcountry, we always pack an extra pair of puffy pants, a puffy jacket, and some kind of really lightweight bivy sack or emergency sack. So if we needed to package somebody up, if we were going to be stuck out there for a while because of some incident, we had some way to at least help them survive, not necessarily be super comfortable, but make sure that they can stay warm. And then I can't stress how important it is to have more than one pair of gloves. It's actually, if you're doing aerobic activities, it's nice to have a light pair of gloves and then have a heavier pair of gloves for when you stop or when you're going on the downhill. I was well into a trip, a one day, like probably 14-hour program. And about halfway up the mountain, miles in, thousands of feet up, my glove blew out of my hand in like 70-mile-an-hour winds and just sailed away. Never even hit the ground. It just disappeared from sight. And luckily I had another pair of gloves, or it would have been time to turn around because it was way too cold to continue with just a fleece liner on one hand. And then water, you want to definitely bring water and food. Extra food is a good idea. I always pack more than I need. And it's ironically, a lot of times I wind up feeding my partners who don't bring enough food on their trips. But you never know if things are going to wind up taking longer, and it's always good to have fuel for the tank. Pack a headlamp, regardless of whether you plan on being out before the sun comes up or after it goes down. It's always handy to have a headlamp. So have that in your backpack because things can change. A first aid kit, we already mentioned this. You can have a group first aid kit, and then you may want to have one or two people that have another first aid kit. Or if you haven't put a group kit together, then definitely bring your own first aid kit. And then your repair kit should be geared towards your equipment. So whatever your equipment is, everybody's got different setups on their boards, on their skis, even snowshoes, something to deal with the strap breaking, something to deal with the binding breaking, screws. Some stuff takes Allen wrenches, some takes Phillips. So have the proper tools and have the proper equipment to be able to repair that. And then I just want to say, we're not going to go into detail on this, but there's a lot of places you can go to websites to get information on this. And I'll actually add some more links onto our website at the Avalanche Center. We have a resources page, and it's got a lot of links for education and other information that's very useful. So I highly encourage you guys go visit that and peruse through it. And you can definitely go down the rabbit hole for a few nights with the information we have up there. And then some form of emergency shelter. Even if it's just an emergency blanket or a little bivy sack, again, something just in case things go bad. We're always going out to have a good time, but sometimes things go awry and you need to be prepared for that. And then your group, that's part of your whole program before you go out. So you want to consider your companions, you want to have the proper companions, and you want to know everybody's ability levels because your plan is going to be gauged towards the ability levels. So the least experienced person in the group is what you're going to tailor your program to. You don't want to take somebody out and put them way outside of their comfort zone. And you've got to make sure that everybody in the group is feeling comfortable with expressing where they're at and how they feel. There's got to be no egos out there so people feel comfortable with saying, hey, I don't feel comfortable going to this area. And everybody else in the group has to respect that. And so that's kind of the group buy-in on how you're going to manage this, and that everybody's agreeing to this pact with your group and your party. And then when you make your plans, you definitely want to leave travel information with a responsible person so that if you have no way to reach out to the outside world and something goes wrong, somebody at home is expecting you to come back. And if you don't show up, they know where you're supposed to be, what you're doing, and when they should have heard from you and when they should reach out for help. So that's really important as part of the planning. And that's the next thing we're going to get into is advanced planning. So this begins the first snowfall. So in our local mountains, if you're planning on going out here, you want to be watching the weather. You want to watch what's happening as each storm comes through and what's going on between the storms, because this is going to affect how the snowpack develops and how it changes over time. And that's going to have an effect on the conditions and the avalanche stability or instability that we might anticipate out in the mountains. So you want to basically start watching that. If you got big trips planned, then you want to really start following what's going on in those areas as well. And ultimately, at the best, or at the least, you want to start a week to 2 weeks out before your trip. Start checking avalanche forecasts, trip reports, and watching weather. And then maps, you should have a paper map and a compass, not just your little app on your phone. Phones can be very unreliable, and their battery life can go really fast out in very cold conditions. So always have a paper map and a compass, and have the ability to use it. So if you don't have any orienteering skills, no problem. There's a bunch of stuff online you can do. There's exercises you can look up online and get out and practice with it. There's some great books out there. And again, you can go to those resources I mentioned. Some of the local outfitters and guides in the area offer classes. So enroll one of those classes. Usually pretty expensive, and you'll take home a lot of information that's really useful. And then we live in an age where here we are, we're all sitting at home in the comfort of our home or our van or whatever, wherever we happen to be, our backyard. And we have this technology to get together and hang out and do this kind of thing. Along with that technology, we got these great services available to us, such as Google Earth, Gaia, CalTopo, Topo Maps, I think the newer ones, Mega Maps. All those things are a great way to go in and poke around terrain and look at it and get to know where you've got steep slopes, where your danger might be. And what's really cool with Gaia and CalTopo, and I think the Mega Maps app also, is you have overlays. So you can go into those, and then you can put an overlay with slope angle, and it shows it in colors from like yellow, orange, red. And you can tell when you get into those red areas, you're starting to get into steeper terrain, like avalanche terrain, anything over 30 degrees. So it's a great way to do pre-trip planning, and then you can actually put your routes into that, load it into your phone, and have that as a backup, or you can use that as your primary guidance system and have your paper map as a backup. But technology does break down, so definitely have that paper map ability. And then, of course, trip reports are a great resource. At the Avalanche Center, we get observations submitted, and we've been getting actually pretty prolific information now when we start getting the snowfalls. We're going into our 9th season that we've been in existence, so people are really starting to use our services. And that's a great resource to get information specific to certain areas. And people will put up very simple reports to full-on detailed reports with snowpack studies and snowpack information and pit profiles and all that stuff. But it's a great place to go look for that. And then reach out to people, especially if you're going to another area out of your local terrain. Say if you're going to be going up to Mount Shasta, or you're going to head up to British Columbia, find a guiding service or an outfitter in that area. Reach out to them, get some firsthand information. Those people are out in those mountains, and they talk to people that are in those mountains. Get firsthand information from people that have been there recently. That's a huge resource. And they already talked about partners. Your partners are important, and your planning is going to be based upon your group and your partner's abilities and comfort out there. And then alternate plans. It's always important to have alternate plans. Plan A, B, B, that you're going to go out and you're going to go climb up juicy couloir and bomb that slope and the sick powder. But you're going to have plan B, plan C, maybe even a plan D. Plan D might be going to the pizza joint, getting some takeout pizza because we can't go hang out there anymore, and buy some beer and go sit at the trailhead or in the mountains with your buddies and tell stories about the great adventures you've had in the past. But have an alternate plan, because that does allow you, once you're out there, to not be so committed to one goal and go, okay, well, that doesn't look good, then we're going to go ski the low angle trees because that's going to be super fun and it's safe. This other thing we planned on doing doesn't look like it's going to be very safe. And then part of the pre-trip planning ends with the day of. So leading up to your trip, you're going to be monitoring the weather. You're going to be monitoring the avalanche forecasts for our local mountains here at socalsnow.org. Prior to our Avalanche Center, you're going to be using information from wherever you can get it. So I used to go to SCSAC, get their avalanche forecast, and then extrapolate that information and try to apply it to our local mountains before I started the SoCal Snow. So now we have SoCal Snow, so that's your resource here. But there's going to be places as you guys move out into the world and other areas where there isn't an avalanche center and resources might be slim. So you're going to have to look at how accurate and applicable is that information and where is it available. Again, you might be reaching out to the local outfitter or the nearest guide service to just try to get a little bit of information. For instance, we went to the Rubies last year, and there's no avalanche forecast. There's really no information for that area. We had to just pick through trip reports and try to reach out to there's a heli operation and get some information, and you can look on their webpage and find a little bit of info. But those people are usually pretty outgoing and open and willing to talk to you for a few minutes and give you some info. So now and before you leave, sorry, we'll go back to that last thing. You want to, that morning, the morning of your trip, get the weather forecast and the avalanche forecast before you go out. And then you get to the trailhead. Obviously, you want to go through all your gear, make sure you have everything you're supposed to have. I've showed up before and my boots weren't in my truck. Kind of ruined the day. I've seen other people that weren't living so far away, that's like they left their skins and they had to go back and grab them quick. You know, they're maybe half an hour away. But so make sure you go through all your gear, make sure you have everything, make sure you have your food, your extra water, your map, and then check in with the group. Make sure everybody's where their headspace is, make sure everybody's on the same page, make sure everybody's open to communications, everybody's feeling comfortable. Anybody has any apprehensions, any concerns, if they happen to see something that maybe somebody else didn't get in the forecast. And then observe what's going on at the trailhead. Now you're out there in the mountains, you're going to be observing them as you're driving in and look at what's happening with weather, see if you got wind blowing snow around and stuff. But also what you see now, is that the same thing that your forecast told you, or is it completely different? Because that's going to be kind of like, okay, well, this isn't what I saw in the forecast. So what else is going to be different? And you're going to want to pay attention to that. And then once you're ready to start heading out, you're going to do a beacon check. And so you're going to go through the group. There's a protocol to that we can't really demonstrate here. That's more of an in-person type of thing. But you're going to check everybody's beacon, make sure everything works, do a quick sort of a range test as everybody heads out into the trail, and make sure everybody's on send so that if anything happens, that person will be sending and everybody else can switch to receive. And so that's the last thing you'll do before you head out. And then while we're going through this, we're going to keep Keith busy a little bit. So if you guys want to use that chat, I got a couple questions I'll throw at you. And for right now, let's everybody tell Keith what your favorite mode or your favorite winter outdoor activity is. Give him something to do there while he's moderating. So en route, our goal is to minimize our exposure. And we're going to do that by using ridges, and we're going to stay to windward aspects. And just so that we're clear, windward is the side the wind comes from. And the reason we want to go on to leeward sides, that's the way the wind blows, is that's where all the snow gets loaded up. So you want to stay out of that loaded snow. You want to try to stay out of narrow valleys and canyons, such as the one pictured in the middle here, although there's a lot of anchor points and not a lot of snow there, so it's not a big deal. But in the broad valleys, you can stay away from your steeper slopes. In a narrow canyon where it just comes down to a V and it's very tight, you can easily trigger an avalanche from above you. So you want to give those slopes a good distance to keep yourself safe. And then you want to use trees. You're going to tend to go to old growth trees. You want to look for stuff that doesn't show signs of flagging or damage. That means an avalanche has gone through there. And then the thing with trees is on the downhill, especially, if you can ski through the trees, an avalanche can go through the trees. Avalanches can go through tighter trees, but you're going to have a bit more anchoring in there. And for the most part, you're going to have a little bit more security and safety in the trees. The downside of that is if you get swept into the trees by an avalanche, that becomes what we call a terrain trap, and it can beat you up pretty bad. So then decision-making, things to do while you're out there in the backcountry. You're going to continuously assess and reassess the conditions. You want to be aware of what's going on, and you want to make sure that the conditions meet what you expected to see out there. So prior to going out, you've been watching the weather, you've been studying the forecast, and you have developed an idea of what your forecast of what the conditions should be. So as you're traveling, if all of a sudden these conditions don't meet that criteria, that's kind of should pick up the hair on the back of your neck and have you start questioning what's going on, what's different, and why. And if it is different, then it may be time to have a little bit of a discussion. What are you seeing? Why is it different? Is it something to be concerned about? Is it not? And then if it is different and you do have concerns, do these conditions meet our turn back criteria? So this would be where you may go from plan A to plan B. So, and this is where it's really important to have communication within your group and listen to everybody. Everybody should have a voice, regardless of whether they have years of avalanche training or have very little at all. Somebody may just pick up on something and nobody else noticed. And then as we're assessing everything, you want to adapt your plan to the situation at hand. So as you're looking at everything and you're getting this feedback, the mountains are their billboard. It's nature's billboard telling you what's going on. So as you're seeing this stuff, apply that to what you're doing. And then, as I've said before, alternate plans. Alternate plans diffuses our own human nature, what we call human factors or heuristics, and the idea of wanting to stay on a course because that's what we've set out to do. We've been planning that all this time, and this is our day. So you don't want to let it go. But if you got alternate plans, it's easy to step back and go, okay, we'll go do something else. So now we're going to move into travel criteria. And basically, we're going to address each one of these as we go along: ascending, traversing, and descending. And I'm going to take a quick moment here. On this screen, we have Mount San Gorgonio. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that. And on Valentine's Day in 2019, we had a massive avalanche event all through our ranges, all through all of them. And so if you look here, where I got my laser, there's a crown there, there's a crown here, and there's another one right up here in this lettering. And all of that stuff slid all the way down, just about down to ground at that time. And it was due to a storm event that came through with a high rain level, and those crowns are all sitting right about where the snow rain line was. And so it saturated that snowpack and everything started to slide. And it happened, like I said, throughout the avalanche ranges that season. As I went around and checked out different areas, it filled in a lot of stuff. It was one of the first times in probably 10 years that I saw Baden-Powell filled in all the way down through the cliff bands and across the highway on that side. It's kind of a rare instance when you get that. And then in the background, we have Jepsen, which looks really fun. And it is, but it's a big trip, and that's all, according to our closures right now, closed terrain this winter. So ascending, again, we're trying to minimize our exposure, mitigate risk out in the backcountry. So you want to follow ridge lines, use low angle slopes where you can, use treat areas, and avoid terrain traps. And terrain traps, basically, for the simple explanation, is anything that can increase the consequences of being caught in an avalanche. So that could be rocks, could be trees, could be a gully, could be a cliff, could be a lake. Any of those things would be considered a terrain trap. And you want to travel on those ridges on the windward side, as we explained before. Now, on traversing, going across slopes, you want to avoid traveling above or below your partners. It's really good to try to stay in the same skin track, because as the first person goes through, if they haven't triggered anything, the likelihood isn't zero, but the likelihood's a little bit lower that they haven't hit those sweet spots. And then if there's other groups out there, if there's a group traversing the slope, you want to let them go across and then go ahead and make your traverse. Same thing, you don't want to go out above somebody else that's already on the slope, because you may trigger something above them that will come down on top of them. Keep each other in sight, but you don't want to group up, especially if you have concerns about the slope. If you have concerns about the slope, you really should probably consider alternate plan B at that point rather than exposing yourself. But to minimize your exposure, you want to stay spread apart at least 10 meters, which those of us in imperial units is about 30 feet. And what that does is it reduces the risk of everybody being taken out by once should something happen. That because you want to leave somebody for rescue. And the thing is that when you're out in the backcountry, out in these situations, your best chance of survival and your partner's best chance of survival is you and your partner. If you're going to wait till search and rescue gets out there, you're not going to have any hope because it's going to take them hours. Even the Baldy Bull, it can take hours to a whole day to get somebody up there. And it's not that far out. You can stand up there and you can see the cars parked down at Manker Flats. But if something goes wrong, it takes a long time to get help up there and actually exact a rescue. And that'll be another topic we have down the road. We'll actually have search and rescue come in and talk about that. So as you're traveling, especially on these traverses, you're continuously examining the slope, getting the feedback, and seeing if you see any changes. And if you do, that's going to be, again, raising your guard, and you're going to want to, well, what's changing and what's different about it. So now you've gone through your travel, you're out into the slopes, you're at the goal that you're going for, you're at the top of your descent. It's time to drop in. And so once you get there, you're going to ask yourself some questions. Number one, you want to know, do you feel good about this? Does everybody in the group feel good about this? This is the point to ask everybody, does anybody have any concerns about this slope? You've been gathering information this whole time you've been traveling. You should be poking in the snow with your poles, digging in there, even doing quick little hand pits with your pole and your glove and kind of looking at the snowpack. You're stomping on it. You're watching for things, shooting cracks and things to change. So you'll be getting continuous feedback all the time while you're traveling out there. So then if everybody's all good, it's like, well, could this slope slide? You've decided the risk of that is very low. But if it should slide, what are the consequences? And do you feel confident and comfortable accepting those consequences? And do you feel confident that you're going to be safe going into that slope? And once you've decided that, what you want to do is you want to go in one at a time. And you're going to want to either, depending on the slope, if you can see all the way down, you may just each take a lap all the way to the bottom and then clear out to a low angle area out of way of the slope and clear of any kind of run out. Or if it's not something you can see down because you want to keep eyes on each other, you're going to go from a safe point to another safe point, to anchor points. Those could be large rock clusters, groups of trees, ridge lines. So you want to get to those points, and then you're going to stop and wait for your partner to join you, or your partners, depending who's out there with you. And this is where those radios can be super handy, because you might be sitting up at the ridge or the summit on this line that you're going to go down, and the wind could just be howling up there. And so you're not going to hear your partner when he's 300, 400, 500 feet down the slope. But if you have a radio, he can easily say, hey, it was great, but watch out on the left. There's a big icy patch over there, or it was really bare in the middle. Stay over to the right side of my ski track. You know, he can give you real-time information. And then everybody's going to be much safer and have a really good trip. So radios are really helpful. They become really common use in the backcountry for this stuff. And so like I said, stay inside of each other. And then also going back to the top, don't discount what your stomach, your gut's saying, your gut feelings. If you get up there and you're just like, man, I don't feel good about this, something's wrong. Well, find out why. Why are you feeling that? And discuss this with everybody else in the group. So then you've gone down to the bottom. And at this point, you want to get clear of the steep slopes. You want to go out to where you're away from that, actually the slope and lower angle terrain, or over to a treat area or an anchor point, anything that's going to give you a safe spot to group back together. You don't want to get clustered together on the slope. It's just like on the uphill, you don't want to stop in the middle of a slope and have a lunch break. You're going to get to a ridge line, you're going to go to a safe point, you're going to go to the summit, and then you're going to stop and take your break. You're going to do that where you're not exposed. So we got another thing to shoot off at Keith really quick, and then I'm saving the rest of my questions for after this. And that is, can everybody tell them what are the 3 avalanche safety pieces of equipment you should have with you anytime you go out into the backcountry? There's 3 pieces we mentioned earlier in the presentation. So now you're down at the bottom, and a lot of accidents happen at this part of the day, at the end of the day. People let their guard down, you've done all the work, you had the great run or whatever your objective was, maybe you climbed Baldy Bowl and now you're hiking out. It's not time to let your guard down though. You can't relax till you get back to the car. So significant changes could have happened. You may have been out there for hours, and it may even be time to go, okay, well, you know, we're gonna have to take an alternate route back because it got super warm. And look at all those roller balls now. We don't want to traverse that slope. We might set off a wet slide. So again, it's not time to drop your guard. It's still stay on top of your toes until you get back to the car, and that's when you can relax. And then once you're back at the trailhead, it's time to debrief. So you guys, you want to sit down, you want to review the day, you want to go over what happened. And this is, you really want to do this when things went right, when you had a good day. It shouldn't be reserved just for when things were bad or something went wrong. Like, what went right? Why did it go right? What did we do? Did we do everything right? Was there something that we could have done better? Did we just get lucky out there at some point? And if something goes wrong, what went wrong and why? And was there a point while you were out there that you were wondering, should we do this? Is that really where we should go? Is that a good decision? And if you do wonder that, then this is the time to go back and revisit that. Like, well, why did we make that choice? And was it the right choice to make? And then I guess I lied to you guys. I got one more thing for you to sheet off to Keith on the chat, is tell him what your favorite end of the day beverage is. Could be New Belgium, a little shout out to our sponsors. Could be a good, I like their Voodoo IPA. It's pretty good. IPA is nice. Could be coconut water. Might be a good whiskey too. Whatever it is, but let Keith know. Keep him busy over there. And then there's one other thing I want to touch on before we wrap up the presentation, and then we'll open up to questions. And that's dealing with emergencies. We always go out expecting the best, but be prepared for the worst, because things do happen. They do happen. And that's going to require that you have some training, or somebody in your group has training. And hopefully if it's only one person in the group, that person isn't the one that something bad happens to. Although I've heard a lot of podcasts where people actually direct their own medical care because they're the most experienced one out there. But there's good resources for that. Wilderness First Responder, Wilderness First Aid are really good. Again, you can reach out to our one of our sponsors down in San Diego, which is Wilderness Leadership Institute. And you can find them on our website. Down at the bottom, there's a link right to them. But they provide programs year-round in that stuff, and they actually facilitate programs through some of our neighbors up in Bishop as well. And then some of those organizations also have wilderness medical training. And then you want to have the equipment, and you want to have a plan. So before you go out into the backcountry, you want to have a plan of what you're going to do if something does happen. Because even if you're in the Baldy Bowl, we'll go back to that. And actually, let me point that out here. Right here, can you guys see my cursor on there? I'm not sure. This right here is a tow of an avalanche that happened, I think it was about 3 or 4 years in the Baldy Bowl. And the helicopter is hovering up here because that is actually a rescue helicopter. This I stole from footage from Cal 7 or Cal 9, who was hovering above them. And there's 3 people down here and a rescue person. The 3 people took a 1,000-foot slide in this avalanche. Nobody was buried. Everybody survived. One person didn't even get injured. The other one had some broken ribs, and the third one had lacerations from their crampons. They all got really lucky. But it was hours before they got him out of there. Hours. And, you know, you think about it, it's like you go park at Manker Flats, for those of you that are familiar with that area. It's a couple thousand feet of vertical up to the Sierra Hut, and then the bowl's just up beyond that. But if you got to get search and rescue in there and rally the troops, it takes a lot of time. There's a lot that goes into that. So you really need to be proficient at taking care of yourself. And I also want to touch on the fact that in the current climate we are in the world today, our emergency medical system is stretched to the gills. So it's incumbent upon ourselves to not burden that system. It is us that needs to take care of ourselves when we're out there and not add a burden to an overburdened system already. That will change as time moves forwards, but we all have a responsibility to be our own personal care and our own rescuers when we go out in the backcountry, and take that to heart. And the last thing here is everybody, let's high fives. We'll do the virtual high fives. You guys all actually managed to make it through my presentation. You endured it. And I don't think we had any casualties. Hopefully not. But what I want to put stress here is mentorship. We mentioned that in the beginning. And again, I want to go back to that. Everybody with the experience, try to reach out to novices and beginners and help them out. Everybody that's a novice or beginner, try to seek out experienced people. Be friendly at the trailhead. Try to work with people. Help them out. We're going to have less problems out there, less emergencies, and everybody's going to have a better time if everybody's on the same page. And then seek out training and education. And I don't mean just YouTube videos. Those are great, but go out and hire an instruction education company, a guiding service, take some programs. Highly, I recommend hire a guide for a day, especially if you're going to a new zone. And if you're new to this, go spend a day with a guide, because their number one job is to make sure you have a good time. So you're going to go out and have the best time you're going to have in that area, and you're going to learn so much while you're out there. And I'm going to leave everybody tonight with this statement. The more I know, the more I realize I don't know. I learn more every year. And I know my board of directors is having a real chuckle with this one. Because they just think that's me anyways. But the more I've learned through this educational process I've gone through being guide certification, instructor certification, and all that, the more I find out that there's just so much out there I don't know. So again, thank you, everybody. We're going to open this up to questions. So field your questions to Keith through the chat, and we'll try to moderate it that way. You can try raising your hand. I don't know how many people we have logged in, so it might be a bit tough for Keith to navigate the screens for that. So if you just send it in, he'll bring it to my attention.
Yeah, we've got 37 folks participating, okay, including us. So questions should go in the chat.
Yep. And while we're waiting for questions, I can show you guys some of the cool stuff.
We've got...
Oh, we got something. Okay.
We've got a first question. Any recommendations? Wayne Ann asks, any recommendations for maps or route finding resources in Southern California? So fat maps, that kind of thing. Alan, do you want to address that?
Oh, yeah. There's, I mean, any of your USGS maps are great. I can't think of his name. The Thomas, he's got a series of maps. I might have to put this up on Instagram or when we post this up, because I don't have any in the room with me right now. But there is a series of maps. It's got the Angeles Crest.
I believe it's Tom Harrison, Alan.
Tom Harrison. Thank you, Jeff. Tom Harrison maps are really good. And then on your phone, CalTopo. CalTopo you can get on the computer. Gaia is on your phone. Topo Maps is another one for your phone. And then Jeff, is it Mega Maps? I know you were starting to work with that. I'm not that familiar with it.
Yeah, we have Fat Maps. We have
Fat Maps.
You know, and you know, Fat Maps actually requires a subscription.
Gaia does as well. But I think Topo Maps may still have a free one. And I think actually Gaia has a free one too. You just don't get a lot of the features.
Yeah.
Yeah, I use Gaia. Yeah. It's worth the extra $20 a year. I would point folks to Sierra Descents too. It's pretty, there's not a lot of activity on that board anymore.
Yeah,
I think that's Andy Lewicki. But if you, well, it gets a couple posts each year, but there's some good resources as far as finding cool places to ski.
And even the previous trip reports that he has out can give you enough information on his experiences as he went through his route finding, how he got there, etc. So some good stuff there. I'd like to point out also, Alan went through a couple of rituals, a couple of things. The one thing that I like to emphasize often with folks who are getting into backcountry skiing is that take each individual trip as that it's an individual trip. Don't try to, oh yeah, I went on a trip 2 years ago with the exact type of conditions that we were in right now. We should be good skiing this zone. Always take each individual trip as that it's an individual trip, and do your own rituals and get those rituals down and make sure that you apply those rituals over and over and over. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that, hey, I've been here before and I know what's going to happen. Because often, when we actually do some, if we have the opportunity, interviews with folks who have been involved in avalanche accidents, that's an often common theme that we hear from them, is that they applied some of those heuristics that they felt, that they knew that area and that they understood really the conditions that they were in. So apply things individually for every trip you go on. I'll leave it at that.
Another
Thanks,
good
Jeff.
one too for resources is if you go to our Avalanche Center website, we have archived all of the observations since the very first observation of the Avalanche Center. So there's 8 years of observations in there. It's all cataloged by year, but you can go in there and you'll find a lot of information about areas of where to go. It's not going to give you a lot of information on how to get there, but it gives you a starting point to go poke around in maps and stuff like that.
Carp has also suggested Southern California Backcountry Skiers Facebook group. So we've got a question from Andrew Allen. He's curious about how conditions are looking at Mount Baldy. He notes that on Instagram, snow levels look low. They are pretty low. Patrol this weekend spent time painting our new individual patient rooms. There's not much skiing to be had. There is what we would affectionately refer to as the ribbon of death. Some man-made snow, 2 runs down the hill. Don't get off of that ribbon, or there's pain in the rocks.
Yeah, and Keith
let's see. I think we've answered Philip's question. Pardon me. Go ahead, Alan.
I was just saying, Keith actually knows Mount Baldy because he works ski patrol up there.
That's Jeff too. Yeah. And Hans and Jake is on call up there when he's not having fun at Alpine Meadows now. Let's see. Taylor mentions that if you use CalTopo and export a custom area as a PDF, you can use Avenza and it will track your GPS on PDF. Sounds cool.
Nice.
Let's see.
I will point out
question.
That many of these applications that you'll find on that you can load to your phones, whether it's Gaia or Fat Maps or whatever. What's nice is the layovers. If you can get the layovers onto those maps, meaning that I can figure out, okay, hey, what's my problem? My problem is northwest slopes above 32 degrees is my problem. Well, I can go in and highlight those areas, northwest slopes above 32 degrees, above the 8,000 foot mark. And I can do that as a layover on my map. And then as I plan my route and my route selection, both my route up and my route down, I can make sure that I can try to avoid those areas. Now, keep in mind that they are limited, meaning you have to take your observations that you're seeing there on hand as part of your decision making. However, it will give you an idea of zones to stay out of, and zones in which you feel it's a good plan for your most recent trip. So having all those layovers is quite nice in each one of those map applications, and I suggest using them.
Thanks, Jeff. Alan, Joseph has a question. Any thoughts on if the South Fork drainage in San G will open before the rest of the wilderness, or will it just be a blanket closure for the entire wilderness? You have a guiding permit there. You probably know more than anybody about status.
According to the San Bernardino National Forest, that whole area, that closure is in effect until I think October of 2021. So it won't open up till next winter. Our Angeles National Forest closure is in effect until April of 2022. So still over a year from now.
Wow.
Yeah.
My goodness.
So maybe it'll
let's see. Wayne had his question.
Mhm.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I said it may change, but I don't think so.
Fair enough. Philip asks, speaking of Baldy, I hear the ski resort tolerates uphill travel. Can anyone confirm that? Yes, we do tolerate it. You can come up the fire road from, you can't park in our parking lot if you're not buying a ticket, but you can come up Manker Flat, take Falls Road to the fire road and take the fire road up. But once you get up there, there's really nowhere to go as uphill. We don't allow uphill travel on any actual runs. And so there's, you're with the exception of cutting out toward Desert View and hanging off the north edge of our permit area, you can head to the summit. But when we have downhill traffic on roller coaster on Chair 4, that's not an option either. Wayne Ann asks, how do you manage avalanche risk decision making without a traditional avalanche hazard rating and stability rows? Pointing out that we are a level 4 avalanche center issuing bulletins and not making forecasts. Alan, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, we're actually kind of in the level 3 realm, which still doesn't do danger rows and danger forecasts. So what we do is we'll put out the snowpack summary. We'll read with what the concerns are, what the areas are, and what elevations you'll find those and aspects. And then you're going to have to take that and apply that to the terrain where you're going. But it's pretty much gives you the same information. It just doesn't put it in a little bullet point picture, which is what an avalanche danger rows does. And we don't give you, we're basically, because we're level 3, we're not allowed to actually say, give you a danger rating. We have to have more people on staff. So if you guys want to go donate, you can help us get to that point where we can hire some more forecasters.
That would be nice. I'd forgotten that we were upgraded. What are we, 3.775 now or something like that?
Yeah,
all right. Let's see. John mentioned Sanji area avid conditions might be interesting with the loss of the forest to the fire. Also, crews only deal with widowmaker trees near trails. Even if the wilderness opens, it might be sketchier than normal. So take that under advisement. You will hear from Donna at one of these fireside chats. She is in the field with her SAR teams, and she knows what's what. Also asks, Keith, can you go uphill if you have a ticket? Oh, absolutely. You can buy a ticket, park in our parking lot, and skin up or walk up the fire road. I wouldn't, but I wouldn't fight gravity. But yeah, you can, and then you can ride down.
Technically, it's
and
faster
you can
than the chair
stay on the
ride.
trails. Some days, but you still can't travel on the route on the runs. Technically, uphill, you're supposed to be traveling the other direction.
If you do, stay off to the side and stay off of the busier runs.
Christian asked advice on buying your first beacon. It's who wants to handle that one? I'm happy to tell folks. Our general advice is try a few out. Come to an avalanche class. We circulate. We run 4 or 5 of the most popular current models so that folks can try them over a couple of days. If you have buddies who have different beacons, try them. Find one where the user interface is comfortable and intuitive for you. You can go to beaconreviews.com to get the overall specs, but the reality is you're paying $400 or more for a beacon, you're going to get a lot of the guts are going to be the same, and a lot of the features are going to be the same. It's the interface that is probably the biggest factor amongst those different beacons.
And let me just
all right
on that is, if the beacon that you practice with all the time is the best beacon for you to own. Don't get hung up on names.
And the very best beacon is the one that your partner knows how to use.
True.
That's the beacon that you're worried about anyway.
Right.
All right, Alan, we're
Also
at
the
an
best
hour.
shovel.
Let's start.
Oh yeah.
Let's start that giveaway. What
Yeah,
what
so-
fabulous prizes do we have to give away?
So I just want to remind you guys one more time too that we are a nonprofit. So if you find this information useful and beneficial, we really appreciate you make a trip over to Avalanche Center at socalsnow.org and make a donation. Fortunately tonight, New Belgium has made some donations and we got some cool stuff for you. We'll start out with a little trio here. We've got a red New Belgium